A fire in the clouds. A fire in the clouds. That's what the sun is. And they said it looks like that. Oops. It's just a little detail of movement when it's completely zoomed in. Now it's getting better. It's hard to tell what angle to focus on. So many people in our world, even here at Magdala, changing every day. Every 2 or 3 days. They come for 2 days, for 3 days, 3 nights. A few groups stay for 4 nights. A few groups stay for just 1 night. They all hear about the sunrise. A special experience. As you could tell, when I was fully zoomed out like now, it's all very cloudy today, and the prediction is it's going to be very cloudy like this for at least 4 or 5 hours. Kathleen has mobilized a group here. Some are pilgrims, some are volunteers. Every person is a whole world of thought, of reflection, of prayer, of connections. Is that Eva Luz? She's a volunteer. She's leaving today. Eva Luz, how long have you been here in Magdala?
11 months, Father.
11 months?
Yes.
Oh, almost a year.
Almost a year.
¿Cuántos voluntarios tenemos aquí? A new volunteer here from Mexico, Antonio. Say hello to. Good morning. ¿Quién es usted? Así todo inforado. So this is a volunteers excursion this morning. These little folks are calling us over here. So many people, and not just referring to this morning's numerous visitors here at the shoreline, but also to the readings today. And sometimes people are together peacefully and other times in conflict. Quack, 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 quack. Quack, quack, quack. This little group of geese and this group of volunteers. So many people and everyone, a whole world. I discovered, or I've been discovering recently, the great value of the connections inside the readings. And I have a little practical tip for you. When you're at a reading in the link that you have here from the USCCB, the daily readings, it's a very well linked resource, because you can press a tab for Spanish and it goes into Spanish. But then there's another very interesting link in your English edition of the readings. You can actually hit the source of each of the readings, a particular letter or book like the Acts of the Apostles. And I'm looking forward to that as well when we get to the Old Testament readings in the next cycle after Pentecost. And you can get to that book and the segment that's in the reading. So you can press the book, the chapter it is, I think it's chapter 18, we're in Acts of the Apostles, and from there you can immediately go to the text it's referring to, and in that whole chapter you can read the beginning of it. And I recommend you to do it because there's a lot of background to the readings just in the very chapter from which the snippet is taken, and that helps to give you greater context. But then there's another feature. You can actually go to the other references. And today we have Paul taking a vow in the great tradition, Jewish tradition, a Nazirite vow. And I just clicked on that this morning, and it brought me to the whole chapter in the book of Numbers on Nazirites and their vows. And that shows you also how anchored Paul was in his tradition as a Jewish man, a Jewish pious man, a man of devotion, growing in his devotion to God. Everything has context. These ducks have context, the birds singing in the trees have context, the birds that are up here in the sky dancing around have context, the clouds have context. Our planet Earth has a context, our moon, our sun, the other planets in the solar system, other suns, a whole cosmos. And we're standing here in the context, all these little shells. Each one is in the context of this whole thing. To know our context. When I went out to swim the day before yesterday, there were thousands of these shells strewn on the surface of the water. It's important to take context into account, because many times we are overly impressed by one particular little moment, and there's a whole lot more behind it. I was even just intrigued by some of the concepts in the readings. For example, Achaia. Gallus was governor of Achaia. So I clicked on Achaia, and there are about 6 or 8 different ways to understand Achaia, depending on the period of history. So I chose the one more relevant to the time of Paul, and it goes back maybe 100 years earlier, 150 years, maybe even 200 years earlier, 140 BC. And you have all the growing conflict between Rome and Greece, and eventually the Roman takeover of the whole area. And so that's also context. And Corinth, where Paul is now, is a very influential city, a very important city, an industrial city, port city. Athens, we were there a few days ago before, on Wednesday, I think. And that was one of the most influential cities. But it was also gone through all the history of conflict and the civil wars in Rome. For example, at the killing of Caesar. Then you have the whole story of Claudius, the emperor, expelling the Jews from Rome. And apparently, again, this was a conflict within the Jewish community. And it was about the theme of a certain Christos, which was obviously a miswriting of the way we understand the word Christos. So it was, the Jewish community was interior turmoil, dealing with the fact that many of the members were becoming disciples of Jesus. It was a very difficult moment for the community. So besides all of the political conflicts in a culture, in a country, in an area, in a geographical area, now there are also religious conflicts, because new ideas are on the horizon, new ideas are being promoted. And so you have, this is all from a human perspective, just watching all of this happening. And in a certain sense, we're in that kind of a world today. We have no shortage of political struggles, of wars, of great suffering for the people. And then we're in a time of a great flux of ideas. And the number of disciples of Jesus must have been minimal in the society in general. A small group. And to give witness of non-hatred, to give witness of forgiveness, to give witness of loving your neighbor, of helpfulness. And there we see also a context of Paul when he goes to, somebody has their alarm clock on here. We see Paul when he arrives in Corinth. If you read the earlier part of the chapter, he dedicates himself to tent making with Aquila and Priscilla, because they were tent makers, and so was Paul. That was his trade. And he spends quite a bit of time doing that. And then so it's living a life with people in their context. And living life with people in their context is the arena. It's the lake shore, it's the tent shop. It's where we show who we are. We show our attitudes, we show our convictions, we show if we're people of peace, of service, we show how we also endure suffering and difficulty. And that's the big theme of the gospel today. It's a prayer encouraging the disciples and praying for them that they can endure difficulties and trials. And there was no shortage of those. You will grieve, but your grief will become joy. And the beautiful metaphor that the great difficulty a woman has giving birth helps this little community of disciples at the Last Supper to understand that that's part of life's process. Also spiritually, when a woman is in labor, she is in anguish because her hour has arrived. But when she has given birth to a child, she no longer remembers the pain because of her joy that a child has been born into the world. So you also are now in anguish. How many people are in anguish in the world today, suffering? Wars, human trafficking, cartels, where might and power, the law of the jungle reigns. And then in that context, in that concrete context, we're living in a context to be giving witness, and we give witness in each context we're in. And each of us have our context, and that's where we give witness, how we deal with difficult news, health news, strain in family relationships, financial stress. That's where we live faith, hope, and love. So let's be aware of our context, and let's know who we are, and grow, continue to grow, continue to build family, sibling relationships, child-parent relationships, neighborhood relationships, the kind deeds in a big anonymous city, traveling on a bus, saying a prayer for all those who are on the bus. Because we're also part of the context and we're shaping the context. There we have our little canoes and our paddle boards, our volunteers making progress. And one is going at a slower pace, enjoying the occasion, each one in their own moment. Each person is a whole world. God bless you. See you later, alligators. God bless you in your context and in your world.